Diana.
I'm so glad we're doing this.
Well, well, well. You want to know about my early childhood,
Yes,
didn't
I
you?
do.
Well, I started with, I was born in the town of Franklin
Hmm.
in 1900 and went to school from there, drove a horse, and the first year, a neighbor girl handled the horse because I was only 7 years old. So we went to Franklin, and the, that was the first year of my school. The second year, the district came back to the rural district school number 13, and I went there to school for about 5 years.
Hmm.
And then the district went to Franklin, and I was big enough then to handle horses and so forth. That you see, I'd been probably 13 or 14. So I say I drove one of the first school buses. It was a wagon. We called it a three-spring wagon with a pair of horses. And there was 12 or 14 children that rode with
Oh
me.
my.
Yeah. And I drove down there and took the horses in Uncle Jim's barn and so forth. Well, that was my start again with school days. And I got up to the third year high. I started in 1917 in third year high. Well, my folks had sold out and moved to Wells Bridge. So I didn't care too much about school anyway. And I had taken 2 years of German. We were in war with Germany. They sold out that. I couldn't use that to graduate.
Oh my.
So that's one reason I quit high school in the third year.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm an uneducated person.
But I don't consider you that way, though.
Well,
You've gone through a lot.
okay, you're to take over. I'm not going to talk all the time.
Well, you're doing a good job. What about all these stories, these wonderful stories I've heard of you sledding and going to school and um, with a milk wagon, too? You used to take milk down the creamery.
Oh, I drove a milk. I probably was around 10 years old. I was born with horses, and I was about 10, and we had to go to Leanda with our milk, so we would change, and my dad would go one week, and the neighbor would
Oh,
go
that's
the
right.
next week.
Yeah.
So the week that Dad was to take it, they put the milk on the milk wagon, and I went to Leanda with the milk. And of course, I wasn't rugged enough to lift the milk cans off, and someone would lift them off, and I came back home. Get home around 10:30 or 11
Yeah,
o'clock.
we've been up to that farm. Remember when we took a nice
Yeah.
ride up there?
That's right.
You showed me the apple orchard
Yes.
across from the house.
And all kinds of apples and all kinds.
And a lot of land.
Yeah.
Were you born in that house up there on the hill?
Yes, I was.
And that was a Haney farm?
Yes. That house burned, and the one there sits right where the other house did sit, but it burned. Yeah. Yes, I could get on my hand sled there, and we'd have ice storms. The roads would be icy. I could ride a hand sled practically all the way to school, down to the district number 13.
I remember that. We took a drive over that way and
Yeah.
went down that hill.
Yeah.
That was great. And what about some of these parties you used to go to in Oneonta? I remember you went to a dance in Oneonta once.
I did.
As I recall, you did come across.
You don't want to get me talking about dances because I've danced for over 70 years. I just quit dancing, and I went to a dance week ago, and I should have gone to one today, but I didn't.
You didn't?
Over to Delhi.
Oh my.
Oh, I get around.
It wasn't too long ago you even stopped delivering senior citizen meals.
That's right.
That was only like 6 years ago or so.
That's right. I fell and cracked a couple of ribs, and I thought I was getting along in years where maybe it's just as well as someone else.
So what happened when the school years were over for you? Where were you then?
Well, went to Wells Bridge, and my half sister was only 3 years younger than I, and we had a small farm down there. And she liked out of doors. She was good with horses, and Dad thought the world of her too, which he should have. And so I worked for Charlie Elby one summer.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1919, I come to Oneonta on the railroad.
So you worked here
Yeah,
in Oneonta.
in 1919, December 19th, 1919.
Huh.
And I fired on the railroad until May 1927.
That was quite a few years.
Well, a little over 7. And I probably would have stayed much longer, but coal had stopped running, and they had a lot of men, and they had to lay off a lot of men, and I wasn't getting in and out. I I had I had got married. Carrie and I was married in 23 and came here to Oneonta in 23.
Now,
So
is that when you lived on separately?
that's we started housekeeping on London
London,
Avenue.
that's right.
Then we went down on Miller Street.
Mm-hmm.
Eva, Carrie's sister, it was a double wedding. And
So Uncle Sturt and Aunt Eva were married the same time you and
same
Grandma were.
time. And we lived together. The house was big enough so that we had downstairs on London Avenue, and they had upstairs on London Avenue. And they thought they'd like a little bigger house where they'd have more room. So we went down on, the two girls went out looking, and when I came in off the railroad, they'd found a place to rent down on Miller Street.
Uh-huh.
So we went down and moved in. And I said, well, what you going to use for lights? I said, you see, there isn't any electricity here.
Oh my. So you moved in a home, oh my, without electricity.
We had lamps, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But we lived there just a little while, a year or two, and then went up and around town. We don't want to dwell on this too much. We lived, well, up on Church Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I quit the railroad and went to work for the
Grand Union Tea Company.
Yeah.
You drove a little buggy, didn't you?
Yeah, she has a picture of it.
That's right. It'll probably be in the beginning of this film.
Yeah. That was in the spring of 1927. In May 1927. I could get the contract that I signed.
Oh my, you still have it.
Oh yes.
You've told us so many stories about
And
your trips. They're so interesting. All the people that you've run into over the years. And
well,
the snow and the weather and
well, back on the hills there, when I was going to school, snowbanks was so high, we was snowed in 1 week up on that hill.
up where the Haney home is?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, getting back to where we were, I stayed on that Grand Union job as long as they had the root division. Eventually, they sold out to the Jewel, and I worked for them 1 year.
What would you say that radius was? What kind of miles did you?
Well, an easy way to put it, a 30-mile radius on the northern half of Oneonta
Oh my.
was the route I had.
That took in a lot of territory.
I covered my route once in 4 weeks. I didn't sell any perishable goods, teas, coffees, spices, extracts, and whatever. And
Sometimes trading.
yes, I took in. I brought home everything, even to little dogs.
Oh.
Don't carry them like that. Okay. But this route included
Oh goodness.
heart rate, and and well, Cobuskilla, I might as well say, and Stanford, and Delhi,
Delhi.
and all interlying little communities.
Oh, sure. That's a
So
lot of
I had
territory.
approximately 800 customers.
Oh, my.
And over a period of 37 years, I got to know a lot of people.
A lot of interesting people.
They were. They were. I didn't enjoy the job to start with, but after I got acquainted and they got acquainted with me a bit, I just started out visiting in the morning and every night before you knew it. And they treated me so good, so good. Back during World War II there, you couldn't get tires. I'd have a blowout. I'd have one spare. But his second blowout that day, he was out of luck. So one of my, well, Zenopio's by name actually.
Mm-hmm.
I went down to their house. He says, I got a tire that'll fit right on there. Take your tire right
Oh,
off.
wow. That's great.
And that's,
The kind of people you ran into.
nice people.
Mm-hmm.
I say I had, in that respect, probably the best job anyone could have in some respects. In this way, if a lady and I didn't just see eye to eye very good, I didn't stop there anymore. I picked out my customers. I just had good customers, good, likable people.
That's great.
So now I'm talking all the time.
I like that. You're doing a good job.
What have I missed?
Oh, my goodness. You've covered a lot of things. But you were born in, go ahead. We're starting.
Okay. Yeah.
We're playing musical chairs.
Okay, then
But this,
over the years with the Grand Union, I wore out lots of Ford and Chevrolet panel job trucks.
so these trucks were
Panel job.
Fords, but they were like a wagon. Because you had a lot of room in them.
Well, they were like that picture. They were little panel jobs, enclosed.
So that wasn't the first thing you ever drove.
Well, the one you saw there was one of the first.
Was it the first one?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That man ahead of me drove horses, but I wouldn't have took the
You
job
wouldn't
with
have taken,
horses.
no, that would have been a tough one, huh?
They had to stay out nights and stay out, and I drove
Oh,
in.
gosh.
I drove in home most of the time. I did stay up in Stanford a couple nights.
What was the first car you ever had then?
Well, the first car I had was back in 1917. I been driving my friend's little Ford and so forth, and I like cars. Well, Dad says if you want a car, he bought me a new wagon. He says, so we'll trade the horse and wagon in towards an automobile.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so trade in towards a 1914 Michigan automobile that would seat 4 people in the back seat. It was all leather.
Oh, wow.
It was a touring car.
Mm-hmm.
The top went down, the windshield went down, so I could sit there and, well, I went to parties and they'd say, here comes the Michigan. I'd take a whole load to parties. And that happened down in Wells Bridge after we moved down to Wells Bridge.
Uh-huh.
Then traded it for a Ford down to Whitaker's. And that Ford Coupe, it was a 1921. And I paid $560 for it. And when I drove it out of Whitaker's down to Sydney, they said, you want some insurance in it? And I said, well, I guess not just now. I had just enough money to pay for it. I was partying on the railroad. You know, I drove it down to Binghamton and went to the show. And when they come out, the car was gone.
Gone.
That was about a month after I got it.
Oh, Grandpa. How devastating.
Never heard from it. never heard from the people, the cops that called me up once. And if you ever hear of this, the motor number is 7378086.
Oh gosh, you're so.
So if someone run on that automobile,
You knew what it was.
yeah,
But-
that's the motor number.
But back to that. Oh, Grandpa, you're so funny. Back to that Michigan that you drove. Now you drove that up to a place that I'm interested in because you came up there on Hudson Street, up Fair Street, to a
went
fair.
to the fair.
Yes, please tell me about
Went
that.
to the fair. Well, okay, here. We bought it off of, well, a fellow in Otago, and his name don't come to me right now. But anyway, a Saturday morning, you took the horse home and you left the car there. Well, sure, I'd been around cars, and I went up, run in. He left it in on the barn floor, and he said he'd be up Tuesday and learn me how to run it. Well, after he went on, I went out, got in, and turned the switch on, and had to crank it, of course. Started right up, and I got in, and I put it in reverse gear, and I backed right out around there, and Mildred come out. I said, Mildred, you want to go for a ride? Yes! We went down towards Franklin there, down below this old stone quarry, and turned around and come back. Sunday, well, Dad says it'd be fun if we went to church in that automobile. Okay, so we went to church in the automobile. Come back, and Monday, well, I don't know whether it was that Monday or after, but anyway, we drove it to the fair. I think this was a little after that. He came up. Well, Dad says, I don't know if you need to show him anything. We've been riding around that automobile ever since you left it. But we drove it up to the fair, and as you come down out of the fair, down that grade, it stalled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this cop, and he was a very likable cop, and I forgot what his name was. So he was right there. He said, what's the matter, Sonny? Well, I said, I stalled it. But she took right off, and we came on home. And
that's where you got your tattoo, is that?
That was in the fall of 1917, I'm quite sure.
And that's talking about the fair, Grandpa. You came up in your Michigan up to that fair. What was that fair called? Was it Central New York?
No, it's just Oneonta Fair, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nice fair. It was larger than, there was a lot of fairs around here then, larger than the one they had in Walton or Morris and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good sized fair.
And that's where you got a tattoo.
Yeah.
You still have it?
Yeah, still have it here.
It's a flag.
Yeah, it's an American flag. Yeah, that was 1917, and you'd think that would be gone before now. You see, that's been there many years. It's still there, but faded, of course.
Faded, yeah.
As I faded. So.
Oh, I don't think you faded too much. Your hair color, maybe.
Huh.
I have enjoyed your company so much. We've talked about so many things, and yeah, I feel like there's so much more. You always say that you've lived through the best, that you've had the best. What do you mean? You always said you lived the best life.
I remember when the Wright brothers flew their first plane.
See, that's great.
I can remember that. And think of everything that's come since. I remember we bought our first television right after we were married, and that run on a battery, and we had a charger to charge the battery.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even know they had that.
Anything you wanted.
So everything from vehicles and...
Yeah, everything has changed so much in over these years. And everybody had a couple automobiles, and like I bought that one. Well, even before that, back in school, my aunt, a maiden lady, and she was in her 70s.
What was her name?
Lucy Miller.
Oh, yes.
She wanted an automobile. Would I learn her to drive it? Yeah. she bought a 1917 Ford Roadster for $282. Well, she got so she could drive it with me. So we got home, drove it in the barn, and she never had nerve enough to back it up.
Oh gosh.
That was the end of that. $282. But that one down there, I said that one that I bought, $560
Oh wow.
for a nice Ford coupe.
Couldn't do that today.
Oh.
So you've been driving a long time.
Yes, in 1921, I was boarding at the Wilson House, and there was a fellow there, a taxi driver, and they was issuing chauffeur's licenses. And I got a chauffeur's license in 1921. You didn't have to have car licenses then.
Oh, I see.
You didn't have to have a license to drive a car. So I had a chauffeur's license right up until, well, 2 years ago.
That's great.
But
let's talk about some of your family then. Your dad's name was
Stanley. W.
What does the W stand for?
Warren. Warren.
Stanley Warren.
I don't know where Warren came from. But
and all of your brothers and sisters' names?
Well, mine. Just Mildred. Mildred was 3 years younger
than you, and that was.
Yeah, we had no other. I had a lot. As I've over all these years, I've had I can name 4 or 5 fellows that I say was like a brother to me. Which, of course, they're all gone. They're all gone. I'd have one. Another one. Another one. Yeah.
And now you have 2 sons.
Yeah.
And what year were they born?
Frederick was born. Well, you kind of got me on that.
Well, it's probably just as well.
He's 66 years old.
That's probably just as well. We don't mention
He's born in May 7th. Isn't his birthday May the 7th? And he's 66, so you can figure that out.
How about your other son?
Roger is 50 or 51.
And
he was born the 5th of July. I belonged to the Oddfellows. We was having a parade in Unadilla, and I was to help lead the parade. And well, Carrie was kind of expecting, but she said, "Go on there and be all right." So I went to Unadilla, and I hurried back home. That was a 4th of July affair. And of course, Roger didn't show up till the 5th.
It's a good thing, huh?
What else you going to say?
So I'll ask you then, if we go back a little further to your relatives that you can remember as a child, who were your aunts and uncles then? You had quite a few, because I know we've looked at the family tree together. We've kind of laid one out.
Well, one thing that amused me, and I think he was Irish, but I don't know. My grandfather, of course, I lost my mother. She gave her life to me. She died about 2 weeks after I was born. But her father was to our house. Maybe I was about 12 then. And I says, Grandpa Waring, I says, I've been wondering what nationality I was. I says, I can trace a little English, so forth. Well, he says, Stanley, he says, I'm just a plain mongrel, so you figure it out from there.
Just plain American, huh?
But my dad was the youngest one of a family of 5 or 6. He had 2 sisters. He had Aunt Ella, Ella Briscoe, that had a big family, and Lucy, I mentioned Aunt Lucy. There was a maiden lady.
I've seen pictures of Aunt Lucy.
And then Uncle Jim run a livery stable in Franklin,
Mhm.
and he had lost one arm in the shingle mill up north of Franklin. I know right where it happened. He lost the arm. And then Uncle Marvin. Uncle Marvin lived up on Jackson Hill out of Treadwell.
Mhm.
And I used to ride a horse up there many times, many times. Yes.
Well, I always find it interesting and fascinating when you talk about the snowstorms that from your childhood and the
Well,
storms and.
I didn't mind those snowstorms.
But if you got stuck in for a week, it was no big deal. I think if it happened today, we'd panic.
If I remember right, in 1914, we was snowed in for a week up on the hill there. And that Otega Mountain was blowed right full, windrows and stuff. And there was five of us from the top shoveled it out, and the whole crew from Otego shoveled it. And I was right in there. I was one of the men.
That's the only way they had to do it.
I was only 14, but I was
Still
a
shoveling.
good. Well, I was a regular man, sure.
Had to be.
Okay. We would shovel it up about 6 high, and they'd have it packed down. You'd throw it up there, and the fellow up there would throw it on over.
Can't even believe that.
Now that wasn't all the way. It would be in winter.
That was like in the drifts.
Drifts.
Mhm.
And horses that Uncle Jim had them draw the mail from Otego to Franklin. That's the way the mail came over that hill. And one night we was down to the barn milking, and Uncle Jim come in there with the mail bags. He said, my horses got to crowding, and I couldn't do anything with them. Dad said, you ride up to the house and get warm, stand in the aisle, go down and get them, get the sleigh. Well, our horses, you folks don't know what I'm talking about, but they get crowded when the snowbank was high and walking up
They
here,
didn't have room.
and the horse stepped off 2-3 times. Then he starts crowding. Then they crowd the other guy.
Oh,
So,
I see.
but didn't have any trouble getting them on. But Uncle Jim had me probably, I want more than a dozen years old. I used to go down and drive his horse. We call them drummers, salesmen who come to Franklin, come in on the stage, or come in on the D&H here to Otego, and go over on the stage with Uncle Jim to Franklin and sell around to the stores. And then they'd want to go on to Walton, so Uncle Jim would call me up, and I'd take a horse and take him over to Franklin Station.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Uncle Jim, he furnished horses for Fred's stage. Fred, the undertaker there. Now, what was his name? That Fred. Okay, undertaker there in Franklin. His name's something like State. But used to do a lot of driving for Uncle Jim.
Mhm.
He liked me pretty good. Of course, he only had one hand. I've got a watch that you have to wind. He couldn't wind it, so he gave it to me because he only had one hand.
Oh my.
But he was noted for being a good horse.
Yeah. Oh wow. A lot of memory.
Well, what else you want to say? Well, Grandma, her family had moved down to Wells Bridge, or East Sydney really, from Masonville.
Mhm.
And they had a house dance in the spring over to, this would probably be in 1918, spring of 1918 maybe, over to the neighbors, and I liked to dance. I went over, and Clifford, her brother, had brought her and her sister there. So I took Carrie home from the dance, and that's the first time we were ever out together. and I went with her. Well, we were married in 23.
So you dated for a while.
Yeah, I was on the railroad, and I used to go down, lay off real often, go down. I used to help Dad on the farm, haying. I think I never missed helping his haying.
Mm-hmm.
And that neighbor down there, I used to get laid off the railroad every once in a while. That Charlie Albee that I worked for this one summer, he said when I went to work for him, he said, Stanley, if you were a decent man and can get along with my mother, you can stay as long as a farming.
Oh, wow.
Well, and me hit and missing, but I helped move him off the farm. He moved to Unadilla.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but now I got run out of steam. Where do we go from here?
You were talking about Grandma and where you
Grandma.
guys met, and I think that's...
Yeah, well, we went, oh yes, we had a good life. We had a good life. I shouldn't brag about it, but I said I made a promise to her in 1923 here at the Elm Park Church that I'd take care of her for better or worse. And I did that.
You did?
And we celebrated her 62nd wedding anniversary here in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And we celebrated it on October the 2nd. And she died December the 12th that same year.
Yeah.
But we had a good life. We went through hard times, you know. Back on that, I didn't have any. I don't know if I ever had a job where I got paid, knew what I was going to get at the end of the week.
Yeah.
I worked on a commission, and we never started a grocery bill. We lived there on London Avenue. I came in this one night. Well, she says, Stanley, I was uptown, and when I came back by the corner store there, I thought I needed some bread, but I didn't have any money with me. And the fellow says, shucks, take it home. You bring it back tomorrow. Well, I'd seen a lot of credit business in my life. And I says, Carrie, I said, in my work, I don't want a grocery bill.
Yeah.
That's the only grocery bill we ever had.
Was for a loaf of bread. Now, Grandma, though, she went and got a job in the glove factory, didn't she? After you moved
sure
over?
She did. During World War II, she split mica up here.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, she worked in the dress factory. She was a good seamstress. She liked to overhaul dresses, and she made me pants, and she could make shirts. She was a good seamstress.
She taught me how to sew.
I've got 2 sewing machines here now. One upstairs and one down, yes.
When you're not using them.
Well, I use that once. Okay.
Well, she was a great seamstress. I remember that she taught me how to sew.
We had a good life. We went to dances. We went twice a week one time to dances. We'd go over to Treadwell. And why, he says, you know, I just called up and told the music not to come. It's so cold, it was below zero. But he said, I'll call them right back, and they'll be here. And shucks, we had just as good a time as than the 4th of July. And then we go over to Lawrence, and and we run dances up in the Oddfellows Hall. Oh yes, the St. John's boys. I guess you didn't want those pictures or the music orchestra.
I think that they're in there.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I really got them playing. They belonged to the Oddfellows, and that's another story. We won't go into that. Well, we used to, Carrie and she, in the end, her health was gone. She had asthma for years. That's how we happened to go to Florida.
Right.
The doctor said, now maybe it'll help and maybe it won't.
Mm-hmm.
I had retired in 62. So we went to Florida for a couple of weeks. Well, I don't know if it done any good, but she enjoyed it down there. And our Aunt Pearl called us up in the summer, says there's a trailer for sale here in the park. Would you be interested? She says, I think it's a good buy. And, well, I said, if you think it's a good buy, sure, we'll take it. Unsight and unseen. But you see, Clifford and Mildred were in the park. They had a trailer in the park.
That.
And the Fettas had a trailer in the park. So
a lot of good friends.
We stayed in that trailer winters up until Carrie lost her health. For I'm guessing 10, 12 years maybe there in Bradenton.
Yeah, I've been there. I remember that
I
trailer.
know. It had worms in the strawberries.
We had some good strawberry shortcake.
With the worm
little green worms in them. Oh gosh! Of course, we passed that worm all the way around the table to see who would end up with it last. We've had a lot of good fun. Grandma would not only sew, but she'd crochet. She'd make all different kinds of things all around the house. She's made different things. She's made like the Afghan pillows and things and doilies
and rugs. She fell up on a rug up in the bathroom one Sunday morning, and we took the rugs up, and but she hooked rugs. She made colored rugs, lots of nice ones. Yeah, she did a lot of fancy work.
And you've done a lot of work too, Grandpa. There's a picture of clocks here and things that you've made.
Clocks. I made 10 or so of them.
This clock.
I made these fancy things too.
Yeah, I used pillows and things like that. You're a clever man.
Get the one off. One.
How is it? Are you comfortable?
I wanted to. Okay. Carrie, we live here on Separately Avenue in probably about 38, and there was a lot of children on Separately Avenue. And Carrie liked to have her children in at 8 o'clock. Frederick was a little fellow. Of course, Roger was only 2, I think. So we bought a farm over out of West Oneonta, and we've done a little farming over. Frederick kind of leaned towards liking farming. Well, I raised on a farm, and I thought there was a better life than farming. So we went over to West Oneonta. Roger was 2, and Frederick, I think, would have been 15 maybe. And we had chickens and cows and a horse and so forth. Well, we stayed there until Roger went to Morrisville.
I remember living there, Grandpa. I remember living upstairs there with my parents.
We fixed it over for Frederick and Marion to live upstairs.
Right. I was 3 years old, I think, when we moved.
Yeah. You were born while they were up there.
Yeah.
So, Carrie, we shipped about 2 cases of eggs a week some of the time, and made broilers. In the spring, we'd have broilers. Carrie'd dress them, a wash tub half full of broilers, and take them up to your dining restaurant.
Oh my goodness.
But Carrie worked hard, and Carrie's mother was with us, lived with us, and died with us. Well, the milk, first off, we had 1 cow, and then we had 2 cows. And Carrie made butter, and Carrie made awful good butter.
I didn't know that, Grandpa.
Okay. Made it out in the back room. Well, I fixed the churn up so that it run with the electric motor. Well, she forgot to vent the churn one day, and when she went out, the butter was spread all over. Because you have to vent it every once in a while. But that's some of the experiences we had. Another time we had company there. This was after you folks were married. I was on the road. I was over to Delhi, and Ed McCandlish over there, he was supervisor and a hunter and so forth. He says, Stanley, he says, you ever eat any bear meat? No,
Oh,
I never did. I never did. But he says to his wife, give him a couple good slices of bear meat. Now he says, this is good bear meat because the man that bought it, a friend of mine, we were down in the Catskills, and he runs a meat market here in Delhi.
Goodness.
So it's well taken care of. They were lovely pieces, lovely pieces. Now, but he says it's a good idea to put a little bacon with it. It takes a little wild out of it. I brought it in. I didn't dare tell Carrie that it was bear meat. I said, Carrie, they give me some deer meat on the road. And he says if you put a little bacon with it, it'll give it a better flavor. Well, she says, I guess I know how to cook deer meat. So, and Bob Nichols. Bob Nichols was about the same age as Roger. Am I getting this right?
I
This
think
is
so.
Roger. Okay. He was having supper with us. Carrie passed this around. Here, Roger says, here, Bob, have some bear meat. And they took a piece, and I took a piece, and Carrie took a piece, and each one, we'd all eat up our piece. The pieces were large enough so there's enough for 4 of us, and there was still another one left.
Another one left. Wow.
So Carrie cut that up and started passing around. Of course, to me, it bothered me to keep my mouth shut. You understand that? Okay. I said, you know, this is a pretty good joke, and I can't keep any longer. Roger said, bear meat. You know, this really is bear meat. They didn't eat their meat.
They didn't eat the second piece, huh? Wasn't as good as the first.
Well,
I can remember that farm over there. I vaguely remember chicken coops and chickens. And there's a great horse story. Tell me about the horse story with Dad. His little pony, his little horse that gave him so many problems, wouldn't come back to the barn.
Oh, he had an awful pretty nice black and white spotted horse, a nice one, that had probably been out in the west. Because to catch that horse, you go up there and he'd just keep a little ways away from you. All of a sudden, I see Roger going up with a halter, with a rope behind him, and you go up and the horse would be standing there looking at him. You walk up and you slip that rope right over the horse's, and the horse was caught. That's all it was to it. He'd been lassoed sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
He was Mrs. Terrell would take Roger, and this Mrs. Terrell sold the horse to us, to fairs and stuff, and sell rides, and they would stand in line wanting to ride on that pretty black and white horse. Marion was riding him one day.
Oh my.
And the saddle, she's up to Smith's next door, and Roger must have been, shot off a gun. Well, that scared that horse. Now, he'd been around. And that horse would come running right down into our driveway, and the stirrup come loose, and the saddle tipped over, and we hung over. Well,
Side saddling, huh?
yeah, we had a lot of fun about that. Yeah.
This is Grandpa. Boy, Grandpa, you look all fancy. Are you going somewhere special in that coat?
Well, I used to. I have wore this to parties in the winter time, cutters and so forth. And I wore this to school. The last year I went to school in the winter, it was.
Looks warm.
Of course.
Looks warm. What's it made out of?
It's horsehair, an awful nice light skinned horse. They vary very much. Yeah, it's a horse that Dad traded and bought. A nice old horse. But she would get tired. I used to go down to Otego after feed and stuff and used to come up the hill through the pasture. Didn't come around the road because that was full of snow. And get a steep little place, she might lay right down.
Oh my. Turn around.
So
Let
let
me
her
see.
lay there a minute and she'd get up.
Look at the back of this. And that collar. What's that collar, Grandpa?
Yeah.
Nice and warm, huh? Oh goodness. Okay, now let's see the front. What's that collar made out of?
Well, that's sheep's.
Sheep.
Yeah.
That's great.
I can't
Nice.
say it now. What is it?
Sheepskin.
The fleece of sheep. You look great.
Wool. It's wool.
Wool. You look great.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the Oddfellows uniform, Canton branch of the Oddfellows, that I used to drill with up in the RPI proving grounds. I've been on that in Schenectady and in Buffalo and Rochester and in Little Falls and I don't know where else.
And what year span was this?
Different years.
When do you think you started?
We'd have a convention that year, and this would be at the convention in August.
So this started maybe 1930?
Could be. Yes, probably. Probably in the 40s,
Mm-hmm.
the 50s, 60s. That's about the end of it. They don't parade anymore. They don't like parades. Cities and villages don't, and you can see why.
Yeah. We have pictures of this that we're going to include too, of pictures of you in a parade. I think. Anything else that you want to say before we finish up, Grandpa?
Well, Grace Feta after I retired, Grace Feta run a furniture store, sort of a second-hand affair, and they would buy broken furniture up to Monty Ward's, and I'd put it together and deliver it for her.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd done that for a number of years. Drove in. Carrie used to ride with me all over.
You've done some caning and different things like
I've
that
caned
too.
chairs. Yes, I've done.
You've made baby cradles and.
Baby chairs, cradles.
A lot of woodworking things.
Yes. I just try to keep busy.
That's important.
I feel so, and I have you telling me that that's helped me to live as long as I have.
And I love that famous saying that I hear so much from you, that you tell me it's only a stage. Remember, from Mark Twain, what do you say? You say it's only a stage and we're on and we're off.
Oh, okay. Well, life is merely a stage. True, and so true. Come on the stage, do our little part, walk off, and someone takes their place. And life goes on.
And you're a happy man.
Yeah.
You've always been pretty happy.
I think I have a nice lot of friends.
And you make me happy, Grandpa. Thanks for doing this.
Well,
it's been fun.
I hope it's of interest to anyone. I hope so.
I'm sure it will be. We thank you very much.